And you guys know.
Okay, great. Okay, so welcome, Lisa. I, I don't think we've spoken for about a year or maybe two, but we worked together last time. It's been that
Has
long?
it been a
Maybe
year?
a year, I think. Maybe. I don't know. It's been a bit of a blur, but we worked
Yeah.
last time with a client, and it was really lovely to just work with you and get to know you and to know your super skills or get to know your super skills because I'd only heard about them firsthand, and I was privileged and honored actually just to be exposed to your network as well, which is really vast, and your wealth of experience. But just for the people that don't know you, for the purpose of this lovely Family Frith Foundation podcast, could you please just tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Oh, well, Alex, I'm really happy to
And
be here.
it's not an interview.
I loved working with you. What was the name of our WhatsApp thread? Do you remember?
I can find it.
It was something potent. And it was from something that we had been discussing. And we were a team that just
What?
surrounded
Yeah.
our client with what was it called?
What a team.
What a team, because we were. And it really felt that way, and really surrounding our client with love and support. And yeah, so what am I? Who am I? Um, I mean, do you want the long version or the short version? Should we start with the
I've just
short
paid for
version?
Zoom Premiere Pro, so you can take all night. I could listen to you talk all
Okay.
night. Long version.
There's a comedian called Eliza Schlesinger, and she talks about people that are contextual communicators. So you'll ask someone a question, and they'll be like, "Well, when I was 7, I showed an aptitude for the clarinet." Because they want to give so much context. And I'm one of those people. I'm a contextual communicator. So vast apologies for the amount of editing that you will have to do. But yes, I'm Lisa Larn. I work as a divorce and resilience coach. I support people all over the world in transition, whether they're not sure if they want to separate and they're going through that process, whether they're deep in the weeds of divorce, which I have a client right now who has 12 active cases in 2 different countries, and it's an 8-figure divorce,
Oh.
and all the way to somebody who might be representing themselves in court and supporting them. And then the aftermath, because as we know, divorce or separation can be the beginning of, it is the beginning of a new chapter. But it doesn't mean that it's all going to be sunshine and skipping and roses and look at this person and how their life trajectory just, all their dreams were fulfilled now that they're out of this marriage. It can be very much a potent liminal space, but it isn't always pleasant. And it brings up everybody's wounds and fears and different parts all kind of collaborating for and against, whether they're all good parts, as we know, but so much richness can come out, but so much trauma can come out too. And so that's really my work throughout, is working with people's neurology, working with their body, their nervous system. I've been working with people's sort of that somatically since I was 24, and I'm 47 now. So a chunk of time. And I do have a story as to why I started doing this work. I specialize in narcissistic abuse recovery, and there's a reason for that. I don't think people just wake up one day and, you know what, I think I'm going to do? I'm going to help people through their separations and divorce. I'm also going to help them through the deep psychological warfare of abuse. And so there's that too. But yeah, that in a sort of nutshell is what I do.
I always so just to cut in as well. What I find so funny is I interviewed somebody else as well talking about narcissism and abuse, but the smile that was on their face when they were talking about it, and I find that such a contrary thing because people that obviously they're living through it and you're working with clients, you're dealing with immediate trauma. There's nothing funny about it. We're not smiling in that situation, although, there is a this kind of delicate balance, I'm sure, of working with the present problems and finding solutions, but also to bring some light to it, which I really enjoyed when I worked alongside you, that you were able to balance those two things. So you had these amazing strategies that you gave people that they could go and practice in their day-to-day life. We gave them homework. But at the same time, the calls that were with you, you could noticeably see that the client was hopeful, uplifted, felt like they had a purpose and that they just needed the step by steps because it's when you talk about abuse, I think part of what you said earlier is divorce and resilience. Um, it's the overwhelm, isn't it? It's having to cope with the overwhelm of all of the unknowns because obviously you've been working in this field, so you know a lot about it. But so many people, when they're just going through it to start with, or even 3, 4, 5 years down the line, they're still in overwhelm, right?
Absolutely. And it hits on every core wound, every primal wound, as we might say. And it's funny that you mentioned the smiling because sometimes when I'm doing a, discovery call, intake call, as I was yesterday, um, at some point I usually stop and I say to this person that I've just met, who's sharing with me some of the most intimate, vulnerable, and really quite tragic, awful situations that they have endured for sometimes 20 years plus. And it's so tender, and I feel it in my heart. And I stop and I say to them, I just want you to know, because we've just met, that when I'm kind of smiling and nodding, that in no way means that I'm invalidating what you're sharing with me. And without exception, people are like, oh, I know, like I feel you, I feel your empathy and your love in this moment. But it has to be said because so often when they'll say something, I'm like, "Mhm."
Yeah, it's the recognition of oh yeah, the patterns that you can notice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it is patterns, and I have a brain, for better or worse, that picks patterns out, being neurodivergent. And it's a superpower in this sense because I can predict with pretty scary accuracy what somebody who has that kind of makeup of narcissism, narcissistic patterns, what they're going to do next, and also what somebody's going to tell me they did.
Right.
And so
So
it's that of recognition, which creates like a resonance and a sort of attunement between us because they're like, how did you know?
well, for those that don't know, let's make it really simplified because obviously myself as included, I've done a lot of research on narcissism. Like you said, you don't just wake up one morning and, think that that's going to be your field of expertise, and it all comes from personal experience. But for those people that maybe aren't even familiar with the term, I certainly wasn't. I think back in the day, I was more inclined to use sociopathy was an interesting term that was being thrown around in the courts at the time. So could you break it down for people that don't really know, like, narcissism, there's lots of information out there, but from your perspective, could you describe what that means?
I mean, how long have you got?
Like I said, a Premier Pro account.
Yeah, and there are pluses and minuses to how it has become so mainstream to talk about narcissism. Ultimately, I think we live in a narcissistic culture. And there's been positives to it because more people understand what narcissism is and what to look for. But suddenly everybody's a narcissist. And of course, we all have narcissistic traits. And as we're children, we grow up, we're quite narcissistic as children, right? It's all me, 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 me. And that can either shift as our brain develops and our prefrontal cortex develops and or sometimes it doesn't. And so there are many different types of narcissism. I don't think we want to get into the weeds about that too much, especially since there's so much information online, so many brilliant teachers like Dr. Ramani
Yes,
and
right.
Richard Gannon or Grannon. I always forget his name. But there's so much information which is a positive. The backlash to it, and I'll come back to your original question in a minute, but the backlash to it is, well, you can't call somebody a narcissist if they don't have an official diagnosis.
Right.
So we know that NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, is included in the DSM-5, which is kind of the Bible for psychologists and psychiatrists to really give someone a diagnosis. And there's 9 main characteristics. Do you want me to list them? Because I probably have
Can
to
you
look at my
remember
notes
them?
to forget a couple. My memory's not what it used to
I'm
be.
not sure if I
Um,
can remember them.
but you have to have at least 5 to qualify to be diagnosed with NPD. But because of the way that it presents, it's very unusual, for somebody with true NPD to say, you know what, I think I might be a narcissist. So I'm going to go and have some therapy to see if I can just be a kinder, um, better person because of what I'm about to describe. So that's not really going to happen. So I'm really for looking at patterns again, looking at experiences and validating people's experiences and say, when a client says, I think my wife or husband is a narcissist, I'll ask, okay, let's look at behavior, let's look at patterns, let's look at emails, let's look at text, let's look at the actions. Because that person's never going to sit in front of somebody and very honestly say, I'm really, really worried I'm a narcissist. And the reason for that is what we know, and there's still research, and the new piece of research I was reading the other day, which was really focusing on I mean, there's been books about it, and a few very prominent doctors have written stuff about it, that it's more genetic than we thought it was, which is hard to know because often you'll see narcissism come down through the family. But was that because that's their blueprint psychologically, or is it because it's actually genetically a predisposition? And so we don't know. There's lots of gray area. But what we do know, I think, with pretty much good level of certainty is that when we grow up with a lot of shame inside us,
Mm.
it's incredibly difficult to deal with shame. I think the first time I saw shame on my son's face, I felt like, oh, there's no going back now. Like I
Yeah.
saw that he had done something, and you're a mum. I'm sure you've had this moment where you look at your little kid, your tiny little, perfect little, and you're like, oh,
Mm.
someone reprimanded them in a store,
Mm.
or you did.
A parent
And
locked them or something. Yeah.
yeah, and you like see it. Oh my God, I did something wrong. I'm not lovable. I'm not a good person. It descends.
Yeah.
And as I'm saying it, I get a lump in my throat. 'Cause I'm like, we all have had that experience as human beings. But what happens with a narcissistic makeup is that it's so unbearable. And that shame is so loud that in order to survive, you have to create this mask, persona, however we want to call it, which is bulletproof.
Mhm.
That is like, I'm not going to feel that. I'm not going to feel that again. It's how our personalities are created. Like we learn very young, well, if the world's going to be like that, then I'm going to be like this. I'm going to be shut down. I'm going to perform to get love. I'm going to fawn. I'm going to free, whatever the thing is, we decide what our strategy for survival is. And the kind of tender thing about narcissism is that so much pain had to occur within this system and so much sort of overwhelm that this mask, this persona that is bulletproof is, you know what, mm-mm. And there's many ways to describe this, and I probably could describe it better, but this is what's coming right now. Um, and you may have something to add.
Mm, I
There's
love
lots to
listening.
add to this
Yeah.
story, but
So much.
essentially, how I describe it to a kid is like this: so much hurt and pain. Persona is created. Persona is like, you know what, you're not going to touch me with any of your criticisms
Mm.
because I'm good. I'm the best, right? And what's actually would normally organically develop within a human being doesn't. So behind the mask, there's this kind of void, there's like this emptiness. And the idea of somebody's wanting to put that mask aside and actually deal with what is in here,
I feel that vulnerability. Ultimately, that's what it is.
it's death. And
Yeah.
you see that with narcissistic collapse, is that when the mask, and so imagine like you've created this persona, you really believe that it's you. And in order to not touch that shame, you have to really believe also that you are the opposite of that.
Mm.
And and then this is why, as we'll get to, like a truly empathic person will want to will be drawn to that personality because they can feel the pain underneath. And they're
Yes.
like, I'll love you. And then we'll get through it together. I'll love you so
It comes back
fucking
to something that we were talking about
much.
before we pressed record, which was that lovely book by Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote Conversations with God, and it's called The Little Soul and the Sun for everybody that's listening. And that's on the website as well. So go and have a look. Absolutely. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the empath being able to hold that pain without even being able to know the circumstances that created it. You don't need to know somebody's life story or their childhood wounds. But an empath is somebody that's developed this capacity to hold not just their own awful, difficult, uncomfortable trauma, but other people's too. And that capacity is like an extremely powerful heart, but that's also an extremely scary thing for the narcissistic personality because it's an unknown ability that they're not familiar with. And I think that it's like an innate fear that it triggers in them to behave in their defensive mechanisms, which is a type of denial, so they don't have to feel their own thing.
Yeah, let's not feel that. But it's a symbiotic relationship because ultimately I believe there is a knowing inside a truly narcissistic person that they want that that aliveness, that sparkle, that empathy, that love. They want it, like because it's a human need. That's a soul driven, that's a true self with a big S kind of desire that goes beyond the level of personality. And there's still that in the core of every narcissist, I believe. But on the level of personality, there's the mask, there's the narcissistic, persona, but there's not really, nothing's developed underneath. So there's nobody there. And so when somebody says, I don't think their narcissist truly loved me, it's like, well, they're not capable because love comes from this part. It doesn't come from the mask. It comes from deep inside in our core self. That's what we truly are. And so that I think is the most tragic thing about this whole personality disorder, if we want to call it that, or yeah, that's what it is, by definition. Um, it's incredibly sad. And I think when you see somebody go through a narcissistic collapse because they've built up their world, and, one of my friend's fathers actually was a textbook malignant narcissist. And when his empire crumbled and he was bankrupt, he, trigger warning here, he took his life inside of his last remaining Bentley. And before he had to return it. And it's just that sense of when this cracks, there's way too much pain. You can't handle it. And that's when a collapse will happen. And that it happens rarely, but it does happen.
Yeah. I have to say as well that that level of empathy as well, when you get to the point where I wouldn't call it pity, but you just really feel for the narcissist who isn't able to feel. So there's these extreme ways of coping with their own denied feelings, and so there's this denial and then their patterns, and I suppose it is a type of pity, but it's not the type of pity that I'm used to just thinking about. Let's
Yeah.
just quickly
Do you,
circle
do you
round
find,
to
sorry, I was going to ask you a question, but you're
yeah, go
asking me.
ahead, yeah, go on.
I was just curious, in your experience with sort of these difficult personalities, do you feel like um it was part of your wounding that drew you to them?
Mhm.
Because sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But there's this sort of,
Do you really
you're
think that
both
sometimes it's not? Have you had that? Have you,
I mean,
because
it's hard to really know. I think I'm being sort of a little bit
just a get out clause, just in case.
a
It's
get out
good to
clause.
say I
Yeah.
don't know for 100%, but I would
I
say
don't know
I would
100%.
like to, put my money down to say that it's usually attracted, and that's the thing, as the hardest thing as let's use the word victim. We're going to go there. Uh,
Survivor, victim. Yeah.
yeah, but the victim has called in their experience to some degree or other without willing it, without knowing it, and also through ignorance. But it's the it's just such an age-old adage, but conflict and extremely difficult circumstances that put us into survival mode are our biggest teachers if we're open to learning. And let's just cycle back to it because it's a really good question. But let's talk about learning. So when you're talking about narcissism and the inability to empathize, with the empath saying, I don't believe he ever did love or she ever did love me, because they're not capable of fully feeling the depths of their own feelings. They can't possibly mirror and feel your own or yours. And so, just bring it back to the family court process. I would love to
Mhm.
talk about mediation with you,
Yeah.
because to me, I have never heard of a mediation situation that's actually been successful in achieving what they set out to get. And more than more than most times, I've noticed that it takes an angry person to take a person that's just trying to get away from the angry person. I'm really simplifying it.
Yeah.
They take them to court, and then the court says, well, you have to do mediation first. I mean, there's ways of getting out of it if you can prove that there was visible physical, usually evidence of abuse, but sort of coercive behavior, financial abuse, all those things are really difficult to prove. So then sitting in a room with this trained mediator, I say trained, trained mediator who's trying to hash out the, well, what do you want and what do you want and where's the compromise in it? And it's all very matter of fact and trying to, how the court process is very sterile. And
Yeah.
actually, what you've got is either the angry narcissist who's playing that game and befriending the mediator and telling more lies or manipulating situations to their benefit, or completely unwilling to mediate and declaring it there and then, which is, I think, most common of the most common experience that I've seen, come to me. So yeah,
Yeah.
do you want to talk about that a little bit? To,
Yeah.
like mediation to me is a kind of failing attempt, and I think that we need to up the game.
Absolutely. And as you know, there's different types of mediation. And for those that don't, it ranges everywhere from what I would call like a spiritual mediator, who doesn't necessarily have a legal background, but they're very relational, all the way to, and I'm in the States, even though I have an English accent. I live in Colorado, and so I deal with people all over the world, but, most recently, quite a lot of different mediations here in the States, which is you have somebody who practices law and mediation, and then the range of everything in between. And you can hire a collaborative mediator, you can hire a mediator, and then each party has their own lawyer. And really, then the mediator is more of a sort of what do they call those people that sit there and mediate the presidential debates? Like just someone who's sitting there, who's just holding the space.
Yeah.
Um, and when people come to me at the initial stages and they're telling me about this very toxic partner that they have, I have to take their word for it. I know I'm only hearing one side, but I have to take their word for it. And I say things like, based on what you've shared with me, I would not recommend mediation. I cannot tell you how many times I've said that. Some people have already tried mediation, and like you said, the problem with mediation is that it assumes that both parties are coming from an honest place and are coming from a true desire to come to a collaborative solution that is the best, fairest outcome for them. And then if they have children, their children also. And
Wait, I'm just going to interject. May I just
yeah,
jump in? Because I've just had an
yeah,
inspiration. How amazing would it be that before this prescribed mediation, because in the UK, it's very prescriptive, it's very
yeah.
standard practice. Well, don't want to waste the court's time. You can probably figure it out in mediation.
And here too. Yeah,
How
yeah,
about if there was just a blanket NPD, did you call it? Narcissistic
yeah.
NPD test or just basic test that would alert a professional to go, we can do some more testing to clarify that, just to eliminate any possibilities and to have a more well-rounded view. It would, and actually, there would be a lot of help for that person suffering with NPD then, because you could put lots of solutions and support around helping them deal with a separation or feeling out of control in a situation where, it was inevitable that they were feeling out of control, and prescriptive self-reflective. Oh, I don't know if that would actually
Oh, we're
work.
talking about a court utopia
We're
here.
talking
I'm just
about
like,
utopia, yeah. I think a soul
oh.
has to be ready to do some shadow work. But to start with, just to protect the person that's on the back foot, and I'm talking about the empath usually, how wonderful would that be?
I mean, I think it would be wonderful, clearly, by my reaction, but also I have little fantasies like people that are dating. If we ever get to the point where we have a little machine and we can just put electrodes on people's heads and be like, okay, I'm going to ask you 5 questions and see what lights up. Okay, well, all right, you have NPD. See you later.
I bet that
It would be
exists. I bet AI could make that in seconds and code that, I'm sure.
we're getting there. We're actually starting to be able to see like different parts of the brain lighting up or not
Yeah.
lighting up and being able to diagnose in that way. It's coming and it's here in different ways. But we do not have anything that would definitively be a brain scan that would say, okay, you have MPD, you don't yet. But hopefully it will come.
Hmm.
It would liberate so many people. Um,
It must be just coming down the way. I mean, think about 5 years ago when we didn't have the language to talk about neurodiversity, and now everyone and anyone's wanting to get tested and get their.
Right, and we have neurofeedback, and we're able to see how an ADHD brain lights up doing certain things and how a non-ADHD brain does. And that information is freedom. And it's also validating. So it validates the victim. And also, honestly, people with MPD, true MPD, they might be incredibly successful. It might be their secret sauce in a way, but who is in there that is actually happy? Who is inside here who is actually feeling love and joy truly? And we still don't know. But I think with mediation, I've seen people court-ordered mediation happen in this country and in the UK, and it's usually a complete waste of time, like you said, if there's one difficult party, because mediation relies on qualities that they're not bringing to the table. And I'm on the sort of end of sort of the spiritual mediation. That's my training. I'm with someone who's a very good mediator, but who also does not have a law background. And what I say to people when they come to me is, I will only do this if you both know and accept and are okay with the fact that even if I smell a rat and I think, oh, one of these people is lying, one of these people isn't disclosing all of their bank accounts or investments, don't really feel that that's legit. I can't say it.
Mhm.
Your hands are tied behind your back. And so, from a mediator's point of view, it can be incredibly frustrating
Yeah.
because but you can't because you are a neutral party.
And also, you have to stay in your lane. So you're not able to say in that mediation report, my suspicions are that there might be an NPD trait there. Could you please have that person tested? You have to stay in your lane and just help them resolve usually the child contact arrangements or the financial arrangements of the property and estate management, all of that. So it's very matter of fact, practical court stuff. But wouldn't it be
Yeah.
wonderful if you had to have that training as well? So a media had to be multifaceted and multi-trained.
And some of them are, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give legal advice. So it really is, trying to help people hash it out so that they can then go to a lawyer that usually I recommend, that can, make it into a legal agreement. But it's terribly frustrating when you know that somebody's not going in there with, they're not being honest. And it's very tricky then when you have mandated and people have to pay for this and sometimes it's hundreds if not thousands of dollars to go through a process that they know isn't going to work,
Mhm.
that they have to do, and so there aren't enough protections for this. And yes, if you have visible bruises
Mhm.
and a police report, maybe you can get out of it, but so much of this kind of abuse, there's no bruises, there's no police report.
Mhm.
And so how do you stand tall in that.
Mm.
And I support people emotionally as they're going through that process too, because it's harrowing. You're just watching someone lie and you can't do anything about it.
So let's talk about more like professional qualifications and lying. So that leads me to uh,
Mhm.
Kafkas. Now,
Oof.
I've actually had good experiences with Kafkas too. I'm just going to drink my water, but off camera because I don't want to do any branding. Not that I'm going to be contacted by the local spring water authority. Um, yeah, Kafkas. So I've had some good experiences, but they've been few. And I think that the particularly those women were much older and had grandmas and had so much experience and were very neutral, were able to be very neutral. And so they were a blessing. I don't think they really brought a lot of emotion to the table, but they were neutral, which was a blessing. So they didn't side with anybody, they just told it how they saw it, which was refreshing. But there's also been experience with Kafkas being inexperienced and yeah, kind of making things.
Yeah, it's I mean, we could approach this from many different angles. And yeah, I've had not personally direct experience, but with clients, experiences where I thought, okay, this Kafkas officer really did their job and they did it well. But more often than not, I'd say 9 times out of 10, when I hear how they conducted themselves, when I see the report, through the lens of I'm scanning, I'm looking for what is their projection, what is their wounding, where are they not skilled enough to remove their own experience and actually just see what's happening. And so often, I don't know what their training is exactly. I mean, social work, right?
As
At
far as the
some
Kafkas website goes, that's all it is. It's social work. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the US, social work is very different to social work in the UK. In the US, a psychologist, you can become a psychologist with a social work degree, right? So you would be taught transference, countertransference, how not to project your own experience. But what I see time and time again that is Kafka's downfall is their personal opinions featuring too greatly in their report. I know they have criteria
Mhm.
that they have to kind of match the criteria and look at the cases and look at the law, but they get it wrong so many times. I think there's lots of assumptions around what is best for a child, and I think that there is way too much focus on the rights of the parent that override the well-being of a child that can't defend themselves.
Quite, yeah, actually. So let's just give some examples on that as well. So just for any listeners, situations where that could happen.
Yeah. So let's take the tender subject of domestic abuse within a partnership or a marriage. Um, Current figures, they hover around between 60 and 70% of mostly it's women, but men too, who report domestic violence in a custody case will lose custody of their child as a result. And that is for a number of stated reasons, but one of them is that if you were a victim to that kind of treatment, and I'm treading very carefully with how I
Yeah,
speak here,
thing to do that. Yeah.
that you will struggle to be an effective parent, and you will also have good reason to badmouth the other parent, which is commonly termed as parental alienation, a term that is incredibly problematic. If you want to get into it, I have a lot to say about it.
Definitely.
um, but that is the big problem that I see over and over again is that women or men again are frightened or told by their lawyers not to say that they were abused inside of that partnership because they will risk losing custody. And
Interesting.
when I tell people that who haven't gone through it, they're like, what are you talking about?
Hmm.
That's insane.
Hmm.
And it is insane. And it is also what's happening. And
And,
it has happened. I have witnessed it happen with Kafkas in the UK.
and I think statistically, it's something like 88% women are finding themselves in court having been victims of domestic violence, etc. But why did I want to mention that? Because of fathers' rights and those movements that have shifted the landscape quite a lot, I think, because, that's been quite recent. I think I can't remember when that came in, and the coercion law actually changed in 2015, but the fathers' rights were a huge movement.
Yeah.
And just with everything in society, there's this pendulum that swings to these extremes before it stops to go in between and use the common
Exactly.
sense and the superpower that's always missing. And so they want to correct everything. I find that that's often a problem there. So you have women on the back foot that have been, domestically abused. And the abuse continues to that extent, actually, and the courts can be used as an abusive tool, which is a unfortunate
Yeah. We
reality.
call that institutional betrayal. Abuse, betrayal abuse is very insidious because the institutions that you just think, well, I'll just tell them, here's the police report, here's the evidence of the abuse, and they're going to protect me because that's what they're there for. And when that institution turns against you, it can create decades of suffering where you don't trust that the world is a safe place and that the institutions that are there to protect us and keep us safe are actually turning against victims. And I want to say as well, yeah, the fathers' rights
One
movement
sec,
actually.
keep talking. I'm just going to plug my thing in, but keep talking.
All right. Um, I've worked with fathers who have been victims of and survivors of narcissistic abuse. And so it is obviously not 100% women, but it is mostly women. Let's put it that way. It's mostly women, statistically. And so we need more visibility in family courts. We need people able to sit in family courts and like they do here in Colorado, you're in many states here, you're able to go in and watch other
Really?
cases happen.
Like in the criminal courts
Yeah.
here? You mean a public observing gallery?
Yeah, and it is incredibly important for anybody going through it, I think, to go witness some cases that aren't yours because you're not in that super hyper triggered state because it's your baby and your life. Of course, you feel empathy for these women mostly and also men, but you're able to see the biases and you're able to witness them. And the more people that show up, like often I'll get an email through some of the coalitions that I'm part of, even here in Boulder County, there are Facebook groups where someone will say, can you come and be a court watcher for my hearing?
Mhm.
And I'm like, yes, if I can, I'll be there because the very fact that people are watching them holds them to account and they're much less likely to just be like, oh, I want to go and have lunch. I'm bored. Let's just give them 50-50 and be on our merry way.
Mhm. So what's
And
the
so
thinking, do you think, in England with the privacy of the family courts? I think that they would argue that that's to do with child protection laws, although that doesn't make sense to me either, because as soon as you leave the courtroom and you're outside the building, there's been so many occasions where I've had clients, slammed up against the walls by ex-partners or family members of the ex-partners and all sorts of sort of physical violence. And then whether there's children present or not, there's dangers outside the courtroom. So I don't really understand how that's going to protect anything.
I mean, I could go into a conspiracy around them. It's the
Please
old
do,
boys
just
club.
because oftentimes it's not a theory. It's good to talk about conspiracies and risk.
Yeah, like let's say, for example, let's try it on for size and see if it feels like it's likely
Hmm.
that they're protecting themselves. And because when you are held to account, you have to behave with more integrity.
Hmm.
You have to pay more attention. You have to be accountable to pushback.
Mhm.
And what happens inside of these, and also this is probably a whole other call, but in America, in the same way that there's a prison industrial complex, there's also a family court complex, if we want to call it that, a money-making racket. And that is not so much in the UK. But I do think that if we had more visibility inside of the family courts, more accountability, I do not see a downside to that for the general public who are using it to get justice and protect their children.
Absolutely, because in the criminal courts, I think it's such a powerful tool because you know exactly who the judges, you've got the transcripts, everything's recorded. So that's the other
Yeah.
thing I would love to talk about judges too, because I'm a little bit unsure. I know that there have been judges when I've been present in court in a Mackenzie capacity, that they've been fully blown, fully trained judges that have, you know, probably practiced as barristers and had many, many decades under their capes. Job. But sometimes there's been an experience where the judges have not been able to come in, and so there's been a call from another court, and that judge hasn't declared which court they come from. Now, the worrying thing, and this is a complete conspiracy because I've got absolutely no evidence to back it, but I would like to find out the law. In fact, I'll probably do that with some chat GPTing later. But is there a level of qualification you need to be to work as a judge in a family court, or can you just get pulled in from a magistrate's court? Because as we know, magistrates often don't need any training. You've got a 3-day training program, and it's just a lay person, could be a dinner lady, you know, or the builder down the road can be a magistrate. Anyone can do it. So I would like to know what level of qualification, like what's the baseline? I'm going to have a look actually. Well,
Yeah, have a look because I can speak on that, but not with great authority because I don't know. It differs from state to state here in America. But what I do know is that me and my peers have a running list of what magistrates in what county we like and which ones we don't. And it will often be a magistrate who oversees, who will decide a child's life and fate. In fact, yeah, I have clients right now that are dealing with magistrates in Boulder County that have a black mark against them, let's just say that. And
how
so it
does
can be a
that work?
timing
How
thing
do you
because
get a black?
they rotate. So it's
Right.
almost like sometimes you have to say, can we delay this until we get the next judge or the next magistrate? Because we know that they're actually very savvy when it comes to um, abuse and see through narcissistic and sociopathic, personalities better. But I'd be very surprised if magistrates in this country, because it is such a litigious country, did not need a law degree and multiple years experience as lawyers before they became magistrates. But I can't speak to that with
I
authority.
can just clarify here as well that AI has said minimum of 5 to 7 years as a basic legal professional, barrister or solicitor, and that's for family court. Crown
Yeah.
courts and county court judges can also appear in family court judges when need be, so they'd be called in, which is quite comforting as well. Perhaps I was a bit concerned because the level of competency
Minimum.
sometimes is questionable.
Yeah, you're like, did you go to school? I have a family friend who is a judge in Arizona, and I did have a conversation with her where I asked, have you ever done family law and would you ever do family law? And her response was really interesting to me
Go ahead.
because she'd been practicing law her entire life, her husband also. And I'm sure there's many of them in Arizona, so I can tell this story with confidence uh, without giving anything away. She said, God, no, I would never, I could not listen to those stories and have to sometimes give a judgment because of it aligns with the law that I know isn't right.
Wow.
And that just told me everything, like it confirmed so much for me because that is something that I've seen over and over again where I've heard a ruling and I've thought, do you have a conscience? Can you not see the harm
Mm.
that that is going to cause?
But then
Like,
their hands are tied with their precedents, right? And a judge has to, it's very
yeah,
difficult for a judge to set a new precedent. They'd have to be really, high court,
exactly.
court. So it's
Yeah, and very detailed. And often there's just not enough time, like you have a limited time hearing and they just have to go with the common denominator or just what they said last time because they do not have the capacity and they don't have the information
Yeah, the
either.
capacity is an interesting one because you can see a lot of them with zero care or kindness. They just glaze over. They're really tired of it. Same old that they're hearing. So that's tarnishing everybody with the same brush. Or they can make
Yeah,
up their minds before you might not even get a chance to open your mouth, which is quite a sad
they've
statement. But
made
just
up
out
their
of
mind.
interest, in
Yeah.
America, how does a judge get not a strike, but a warning? You were saying earlier that some of them have got marks against their names. Is this
Oh, so that's more of a personal thing. That's,
oh,
I'm a member of different coalitions and different
right?
groups where we advocate for change in the family court. There's an amazing website which we can share with all of your magical
Yes, let's
website
do
stuff.
that. Mm.
Project Justice USA, which is actually building now like a national list of holding judges to account, holding parental evaluators to account, and ghouls we call them here, who are the representatives for the child, holding all of these professionals to account because there's not really anything like that. And then really within the groups, within our personal little groups, I hold a list and we share it widely. Just so you know, I had this negative experience with this magistrate or this judge, add them to the list.
Mhm.
And then sadly, we have a list of, okay, these ones are good and these ones are just not listening, not making a fair judgment, sometimes ruling, like looking at evidence of domestic violence. And yeah, sure, we'll put the kid in that person's care. I mean, it is just mind-boggling what happens in the family courts. And if you haven't been through it and if you're not informed, the response I get a lot is that'll never happen. It does.
And it's
And so we
difficult
need
because when you're actually
advocacy.
living through your own personal case, complaining or making some sort of, which I just quickly, what that's what I was typing about complaining about judicial conduct. You can do that afterwards, but to do that during your case would possibly have detrimental effect if you have the same judge appear.
Oh
And
yeah, you can't do it during. You
no,
have
but
to
also the
wait.
length of time that it takes for that administration and the process and any change to happen. Which
Yeah,
actually
and
brings
that's
me
why we
to,
need, yeah, go on.
go on, that's why you need.
We need these coalitions. We need these women's groups. We need to actually have a united front because if you have multiple people that have had negative experiences with one particular magistrate or judge,
Mm.
then you can divide and conquer. You can actually do it together. And it's
Mhm.
much easier, obviously, to do that when you unite with people. And the more we do that, the more people will think twice. Judges will think twice
Right.
before they
Is
can.
there such a thing? Because I know that, obviously the Solicitors Regulatory Board, you get blacklisted for misconduct or just even a complaint. But I wonder if it would be considered slander or illegal to have an
Mhm.
Instagram or so. I'm not condoning this. If anyone's going to go and do this now, it's not my idea. But to have like a profile of and a list of people saying, yeah,
We do it.
you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think America is a much more litigious society than the UK. You can pretty much sue anyone for anything within some sort of strange reason. There is even a case, I wish I could remember the details, of a now woman in her early 20s who was forced through, uh, oh my gosh, what is it called? Begins with R. It's when you're forced into therapy to reconnect with an alienated parent. I hate using that word. I will not use that word again. But an
Reconciliation.
uns gosh, I can't believe I'm just blanking on this word. Maybe it's
Shout at
actually
me
hello,
in half an hour.
paging Dr. Freud. Why have you blocked this word out? Because it's ugh. Um, it was a girl who didn't want to be with an abusive parent.
Mm.
The court forced therapy to reconnect, and often that means being sent in the US to a privately owned for-profit um, center where they are isolated from everyone. They have to hand in their phones. They don't speak to their parents for weeks, and they're deprogrammed from disliking the unhealthy parent. And they are making millions of dollars, and the judges have been connected with these people that run these centers. So it's just filtering money, money, money. Sometimes these places are like 30, 40 grand. And at the end, they're brainwashed towards the abusive parent. So they're told that, they were incorrectly biased, or, they were brainwashed by their healthy parent, forced to go and live with their unhealthy parent, where abuse continued. And this one, bless her heart, girl who became a woman is now suing the judge.
What's her name for anyone that's
I
listening?
wish I could remember. I'll
It's
find
just
it
gone
for you.
public.
I'll
We'll
find
put
it.
it in the links. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that was through One Mum's Battle, which is an incredible organization, which if anybody wants to start to enter into any kind of court advocacy reform work, even if it's just sending emails and making phone calls, One Mum's Battle is with Tina Swinton is her name. I always get her last name wrong.
So many
Um,
references. Right.
but One Mum's Battle, we have one in every state. It is incredible the work that she has initiated. And yeah, I haven't tracked that story for a while, but I'll
Yeah, we
make a note to
chat.
send those details to you, because I was like, oh, yes, you go, girl. Like, take that into your own hands and say, look, your ruling based on absolute dog shit
Mm.
evidence ended up with me being scarred for life.
Can I just say how comforting that story is to any mother who's been absolutely terrified of the traumas that their children have had to live through, and maybe still
Mm.
even living through while they're listening to this podcast as well. So for that woman
Yeah.
to go ahead and do that, that young woman, the bravery, it just goes to show. I mean, we were talking about our own philosophies about, souls coming down to earth to learn, and to learn wisdoms and to learn about themselves. But how powerful is that story that she came here to experience all that and then to make a point? And because you're much more knowledgeable than I could ever be, you're my goal. Uh, but
That can't be too
what are
sweet.
the laws that revolve around that a judge can lean on to activate those kinds of sentences? Do you know the laws that need to change? Do you know what they're called?
That is a brilliant question,
Okay.
and I can't answer it with 100% confidence,
We'll do
unfortunately.
some research and have another
Um,
podcast another
but
time.
it is a really good question, and there are guidelines. Like in the UK, we have the Children's Act of 1989, which you and I have been poring over sometimes, just like, okay, this, and this. Um,
I purposely
and
haven't watched the Emma Thompson movie because I'm just mad about the act. Even though
oh,
she's my hero. I love her so much. But yeah, anyway.
there's holes in it for sure.
Yeah.
And the United States, every state is different. So we'd have to educate ourselves on all 50 different kinds of laws and criteria that they work with. Um, yeah, there's a bunch of laws and criteria that they do have to measure up, but ultimately, state by state, there'll be a default. So, Colorado is a default 50-50 state when it comes to child custody, for example. And there are general guidelines for things like alimony and child support, spousal support, and parenting time. Um, and it really just is luck of the draw whether you get a judge or magistrate who is a little bit savvy and can understand dynamics like coercive control, because that is not generally in most states something that has been written into law, which they can look at and rule. And so much I find here in the law, in the legal process, is about you might have a piece of evidence that absolutely categorically would put somebody in prison.
Mhm.
But because your lawyer missed the opportunity to enter it in the correct order, and they didn't enter it in time or with the right language,
Mhm.
it could be irrefutable evidence and they cannot use it in court because of just some kind of procedural nonsense.
Like a lit,
And
lit,
when I see
lit.
stuff like that, it just makes me feel sick. I'm
Yeah,
just like,
even if
okay,
somebody's paperwork's been in order and that barrister or solicitor are absolutely kick ass and have had lots of experience, they might just be shut down or might not have that opportunity. So it's really a luck of the draw on a lot of
Yeah.
situations. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And of course, then you can appeal and all sorts of things. But these things can take years. And what happens is that people do get burnt out. They get mental health issues going through the family court for so long. I mean, in our kind of, I'd say in our little family of court advocacy in the States, I believe in the last couple of months, we've lost three mothers who just couldn't take it anymore because of the family court system. Of course, there's many other victories and we focus on the negative, but it has to change. We have to reform this system. It rewards abusers and it takes children away from healthy parents. Um, it's heartbreaking.
It
So
is.
we have to do what I've found is an antidote to the heartbreak. And sometimes my clients after a year are like, when does it stop? Because they're being abused through the court system with frivolous lawsuits and this motion and this motion, this moment. They're like, when does it stop? I said, okay, I can't magic this away. I cannot. But what I can do is invite you to do advocacy work with me
Okay,
because
this is
it's,
the crux of what I want to get to. Continue, yeah.
well, there's what we can control and there's our sphere of influence and then there's stuff that's out of our hands, right? And so often in family court, what I'll see time and time again, and I'm sure you see this too, is this sense of helplessness. Like I'm in this system, doesn't feel that fair. I feel like my hands are tied behind my back. What can I do? And it's sometimes while they're in the weeds or sometimes when they're done, sometimes one of the most healing things is take your pain and turn it into purpose, which is why I do what I do. I'm sure that's why you do what you do. We have to have a reason to do this because it's not fun. A lot of the time we see people at the worst periods of their life, right? And part of reclaiming some of that power is to say, I'm not helpless. I'm going to bring it into my sphere of influence. I am going to make that call to my representative. I am going to make that social media post and I'm going to raise awareness because if I couldn't change it for me, I'm going to try and change it for someone else.
Absolutely. I mean, it's horrific. So some of the things that women are having, I'm saying women because I think I'm allowed to generalize. And 88%, that's the UK government statistic. So I think I'm just going to go with that generalization. I'm not discounting men, and I have worked with, a few men, but not many actually, to be fair, mainly women. But the the ability to be presented with situations in your life that are potentially that potentially have the ability to thieve your time, your focus, your energy. They're able to control how you feel. So this advocacy work that you're talking about, it's also this holistic practice that you're talking about. That's what I'd love you to talk more about. So I feel like that's like our conclusion for this podcast. So if somebody
Yeah.
was to come to you and to say, Lisa, could you help? I'm not entirely sure what it is that you do, because I think you have to live through it. It's like having a baby. Nobody can prepare you for it. It doesn't matter how many books you read. And it's the same with this. So you can try and explain to somebody what it is you do, but actually I'm going to ask you to try and do that now, for somebody that's never experienced it. Because and if I could just give like a top line, from I've just written a book actually, which I'm hoping to be published. And in that I've written that there aren't any promises that you can give to anybody to make it go away, and as you just said, but you could, if they applied themselves just through personal experience and watching others witness them be able to cope with anything and still not let it govern their being, so that they're not getting up completely paralyzed with depression and anxiety and unable to work or talk. And just talking, people, when people have got that trauma, they can't talk and there's tension knots everywhere and they break down into tears and they can't help themselves. There's work to be done, and this is really the holistic part of the court process that I think is massively missing, and people like you and I are working and creating to fill those gaps. But for people that are feeling really powerless, and somebody came to you, Lisa, um, try and talk about it a little bit. Like, what could you? I'm not talking about the paperwork side of things, because obviously you do an amazing job at that and you're really knowledgeable, but how to cope with this overwhelming trauma of family court.
Mm. Oh my God. It's so huge, and people don't understand. They think you're in a court case, but what you're doing is you're in a place you didn't necessarily ask for. And the being or beings in your life that you would take a bullet for, you're wired to protect, is in the hands of an entity that you don't necessarily trust, and rightfully so, is going to choose the best option for your child. And that is a kind of indescribable psychological torture that can become so unbearable. I've experienced it myself over many years, and I know you have too. And people will come to me and say things like, I want to learn how to forgive. I want to be able to get out of bed in the morning. Can you fix me? And unfortunately, although probably from a marketing standpoint, my business would be, uh, I don't know what it would be, but I'm not a person who's going to say, look, if you just follow this, 12-step program, I didn't pick 12, but it could be any step,
Okay.
right? Um, then you will heal from this. And I don't believe that that is the case. And I think that it's gaslighting, manipulating, and not trauma informed to tell somebody that, okay, this is going to be it's going to define you, and you're going to come out a warrior, and you're going to just be a ninja in all of this, and you're going to learn so much. And even if you lose custody, you're still going to be okay, because we're just going to design it so that, because that's what people are scared of, right? That their kid won't make it, that they'll lose custody, that they'll be bankrupt, that horrendous things, like very, very, very high stake situation. And how do you stay sane, and how do you get out of bed while you're doing that? Well, sometimes you're going to be in bed, and sometimes you'll be so in dorsal freeze, shut down, that you can't open up the email. Even just before we jumped on this call, a client sent me screenshots of something that she can't read. She just can't. She'll have a panic attack. I call it squint and send, where you just kind of, you're like, and they send it to me, and I read it, distill it, and then in a trauma-informed way, in a kind-hearted way where we have resonance, I give them the news. And so I don't even remember the question that you asked me, but it is so
Well,
vast.
you did. You gave a brilliant example of all the things that you do to help people in the holistic. I mean, that's a really practical tool as well. I'm really glad that you said you came across that topic, that you can't promise if you do this, follow these steps and follow these methods, that you'll find your freedom. But that said, I also do believe that you can use different tools and strategies to be able to cope. I think I like to believe that everybody's got a huge capacity to suffer. It's a horrible thing to say.
Oh, no, we
Um,
do. I
we
mean, look at
do.
us humans go
Mhm.
through. I'd love to talk about that for a bit, because that is very juicy.
I'm quite happy to talk about that too. But I do believe that there are, like, even the squint and send, there's a strategy there. You've just saved yourself the morning of heartache and anxiety, and yet the breath of the exhale of relief of, oh, Lisa's got it. She'll get to me on the Thursday meeting and she'll tell me all about it. That's a strategy. You've just bought yourself some time. Go out for a walk with your dog, or whatever it is you do to unwind, have a bath, whatever. So I do believe that there are practices that can help if people want to apply them, but I don't believe in magically getting rid of the stories or the trauma. I actually really truly believe in the power of those stories and that trauma. That's what gives us our superpower. Um,
Mm.
and like you say, when you're mentioning awful cases where people have lost their babies, or children have been horribly hurt, or parents have been horribly hurt, beyond description, then there's no coming back from it. You can't just, you know, so when
Yeah.
people tell you that how many years it takes to grieve somebody, no, there's no amount of years you can put on something. But there's something to be said about owning our trauma. I think that's the first step is just owning that. It doesn't have to be, freedom doesn't have to look like happiness or joyful skipping. There's a
No,
sort of subtle
freedom.
shift, isn't there? So either something controls you or you assimilate. Like a, yeah.
Exactly. And like you said, it's not linear, like grief is not linear. And so healing can look like lots of things. And I don't know, maybe probably using myself as an example um, might be useful. I had
Mhm.
to tread a little bit carefully in
Yeah,
how I describe
be brave and
things.
careful.
But yes, I mean, there are thousands of different tools and things that I do with people from mapping nervous systems so they understand, where their tolerance level is and the things that they can do personally. It's very individual to move from a freeze response where you can't move and maybe you have to move. Maybe you don't have a choice. You got to get up and work because otherwise you won't be able to pay your bills. And so, how we move back through sympathetic and then back to whether you call it ventral vagal, whether you want to call it parasympathetic, and then really very solid tools of how to do that. And I think some people make a whole business and career out of these are the somatic tools, these are the polyvagal tools, and I have a deep respect for all of those modalities. But I do think that sometimes um, clients do much better sticking on a piece of music and jumping around their bedroom and singing. They don't necessarily have to do, which I think is very effective, like the polyvagal VU sound, VU, right? Because that tones the vagus nerve. Why not sing along to Taylor Swift? That can also have a very positive,
I've just got this vision of someone coming out of court going, shake it off, shake it off.
right? Oh, hello. That's been me before. I've done that. Me and Jai, my son, used to dance to that when we were feeling sad. And we know that just getting into our body, you don't have to sort of learn how to do the proper somatic shaking or anything like that. Sometimes it is really simple, and all of those things are there. We don't have to pay someone to do that. Um, I think one of the best things is that co-regulation where a client will message me and say, have you got 10 minutes? I'm losing my mind and I've just got a text and I need to know how to respond to it. I'm like, okay, let's do that. And it's little incremental reprogramming. When we do that for a month or two, and the way that I write it, someone called me the narcissist whisperer, and I was like, I don't want to be that, but okay, I'll take it.
That's a great
Um,
name for a book, Lisa. Get that
it
book
is, isn't
covered.
it? A
It
little
is, yeah.
bit. Because I'll be like, this is your answer, and they can't grab hold of anything. So slowly but surely they actually stop because it's not as fun to sort of trigger you all the time. They don't get supply from it. So all of these things, and having said all of that, knowing how yoga has saved my life and dancing has saved my life and all these things, recently being back in litigation after, patterns of litigation from, almost 15 years now. Um, I had a little crisis of confidence about my work. And the reason for that was that there was a period of relative calm where I had sort of upped the intensity of what I was doing and the work that I was doing because I was like, I'm free. So I feel like I can speak about abuse all day and it's not going to be triggering. And then what happened was when I entered back into litigation around child custody, my child is 16 and a half now, and we're back in. Um, I I was in bed. I was in bed. So I'm like, okay, so you've been doing somatic work for 25 years. You've been coaching for 22, and you're in bed and you can't get out of bed. And then there was just this little voice, like this little wisdom voice that was like, you know what? being in bed is appropriate right now.
That is
You would tell your clients the same. I say to them sometimes, it's okay, you're in bed, embrace it. Do, cry into your candy, like Twizzlers, candy, whatever, you're in bed, but you know what? Tomorrow morning, I'm going to call you up and we're going to get you out of bed.
yeah.
But give yourself that time. And so when it was happening again to me, with all of this experience and stuff under my belt, I was like, the tools don't work. And I had a massive crisis of confidence.
Mm.
But then I did get out of bed and the emails were coming in and I was doing a quick scan, like, okay, how do I feel? And I was like, where's the charge? Am I numb? Am I in dorsal? Like, what's going on? Where's the charge here? And it just wasn't there. And it's because the tools do actually work. Hooray! And it's horrible that it's happening. I'd rather it wasn't happening. But there is something kind of poetic about the fact that we get a completion. It's the last war that we're
Like a
going to
test
be
of
in.
your mastery as
And it's
well.
kind of a test. Yeah, it's like
It is.
I had to go through that moment where I was like, none of this stuff works. Oh my God, I'm
Mhm.
I'm never going to be able to get out of bed. And then, well, if they honestly, everything that has happened in my life, if the tools didn't work, I don't not sure that I would be here.
Hmm.
If
You have to
these things
walk the
didn't
walk,
work.
walk the talk, walk the walk. Yeah.
Yeah, so I got out of bed and I was like, where's the charge in these emails? Nothing. And actually, I was laughing when I was reading the
Yes,
motions. I
that's
was
how
like,
we started this podcast before recording, everybody. We were just laughing about situations. Yeah.
most people and me 10 years ago would have been floored by this, but I'm just reading it and I am laughing because
I'm
it
just going
is
to
so,
give some perspective for people that are really in it. The difference between being really in it and the typical narrative of, I can't believe this person did this or is saying this about me or did this to me. And, I can't believe this is a disbelief. And this is a victim sort of condition where that person's action and thoughts are deeply affecting our lives. We're desperate for some sort of validation from them or some grander authority that can control them to approve of us. It's really basic. It's really basic empath, empath's needs. And then with the tools, when you work to it, what we were doing at the beginning of this podcast, which was actually so lovely, and I've definitely shared it in myself, is the lightness that you get from doing your own personal work. And it can look vastly different for different people. But there's a sort of ludicrousness about it. Once you can see the patterns, once you understand that words that are chosen completely unconsciously by other people, I don't believe that a narcissist wakes up in the morning and goes, right, what words are going to really hurt that person? Or I'm going to get up and be the biggest dickhead I can be. Honestly, I think it's completely subconscious. It's like an automatic pilot that they just are in that reactionary mode and that's how they speak and that's how they think. I truly believe that. I think there's a
my
certain
dad,
premeditation that goes along with it. But the ludicrousness of the simplicity of reactionary behavior from childhood traumas and not having dealt with demons, not being able to cope with all of that, vulnerable shame you were talking about right at the beginning of this lovely session. But it is ludicrous when you see the hilarity in it. Um,
yeah.
that it actually, none of that, it's this ridiculous cycle and it doesn't serve them. It doesn't make sense. So there is laughter to be found in the most difficult situations, which I actually believe that's what gets people through when they're suffering. You have to find the
Oh,
worst
yeah.
kind of comedy and the best kind of comedy is that's really edgy, that you shouldn't be laughing about it, but you
Oh,
do
is the
have to.
comedy. A
Yeah.
dark comedy is a coping mechanism that I've pulled on my entire life. And I I do think that I mean, they do say something like tragedy plus time equals comedy. Um, and these situations can be tragic. I mean, there are serious consequences
Mm.
if justice isn't served, shall we say, um, in general. But this is where resilience comes in. And this is why I call myself a resilience coach as well, because it is all about building resilience. And one of the things, and I wouldn't wish this upon anybody, but since it's happening, since this is the reality, the acceptance has to happen. That's not easy, but once the acceptance happens, there's this sense of meaning making. So what can I take from this and how am I growing from this? Which is, it's like pop psychology 101, but it is true. But then there is this sense, it's very hard for people to hear this when they're in the weeds because it is not a nice place to be. And people do suffer immensely, and I see it every day. Is that you start to not sweat the small stuff in your life. And what do all pretty much spiritual traditions and practices teach us?
Hmm. Don't sweat
You
this.
know, acceptance. This is what is. You accept what you can. Like the Serenity Prayer.
Yeah, yeah.
Life grant me the. Oh God, I'm blanking on that as
I
well. But I've
literally wrote it to someone the other day. Hang on, I'll pull it up. One sec.
yeah,
It's on my
grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to change the things that the wisdom to change the things I no, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
right.
Somebody needs a caffeinated drink.
I don't. I need
Grant me the
a
serenity
chamomile.
to accept the things I cannot change,
Hmm.
the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Brings me to tears. Because you have to know that you don't have control over some things, but you do have a lot of control over a lot of things, and one of them is your perception and how you treat yourself and how you talk to yourself and how you hold yourself with grace and with dignity while you're going through something that is undignified at times for your children, for you. And at any point, know that even if the worst thing happens, the thing that you dread the most, that you will actually survive it. And people go through horrible, horrible things. They get to the other side of it. And there are people, you hear a story like there's twins and they grew up with an alcoholic father, and one of them is like super successful. And by success, all the societal successes, like runs a big company, but is also really happily married, blah, blah, blah. The other one is, homeless and on the streets. Let's really over exaggerate. And they're both asked, what do you think put you in this position? And they both say, well, my dad was an alcoholic.
Mm.
And I think that that is very reductive and very surface level. There's so much more to it. We're
Yeah.
working with our own unique nervous systems, and there's so much trauma and so much. And I don't want to shame anyone and make them feel like they're not
Yeah,
doing
or
as
simplify it.
well as they should be.
But it's a
I
good
don't want to
top line
oversimplify.
analogy. It's a good top line analogy. It's about perception. It's about choices. It really does matter. And the same
Yeah,
goes for you hear all those TED Talks that people that were in the gutter or homeless or that have been tragically like um, sensory disclosure here with, raped multiple times or what have you, that they've managed to completely turn it around, and not let that define their lives. The human condition is an amazing thing.
we are incredibly resilient, all of us,
Mm.
but it can be covered up with so many layers of heaviness. Like I've experienced it. Like, oh my God, I do not have the support of my family. I have incredible friends, but I do not have the support of my family, who once told me that I should not, I should just give custody away because it would cost me too much money to fight. And when you're dealing with all of these kinds of betrayals, it's very easy to just think there is no upside to this. This is horrible. I don't wish this upon my worst enemy. And this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I had to go back to Viktor Frankl then. And I was like, well, he got through a concentration camp. And one of the defining factors of people that actually survived was their mindset. And again, I don't want to shame anyone, because anyone that's in the weeds listening to this right now, if you're in bed right now, I'm with you. I've been there. Like if you're so angry that you just smashed a glass because you just read an email where your ex was lying
Mhm.
to the courts, like all of this suffering is not to be belittled at all in any way. Um, but there are ways to kind of pull yourself up as slowly, and really is about finding other people who've been through it. And they're
Mm.
like, follow me, I know a shortcut.
Yes, and also being able to be ready. When a switch goes off, everyone has their maximum that they can tolerate, and then a switch goes off, and then it's such a subtle shift.
Mm.
And then someone has just this moment of going, no, no more. It's like stopping smoking or anything. There's a real something shifts and it never goes back. It's just, I know I'm going to do something about this. And I'm not talking about, really motivated people that are already wake up with buckets of dopamine. I'm talking about people that have got zero dopamine and are really struggling with getting rid of their cortisol and adrenaline, but that switch can go off big time because there's only so much a human body, the physicality can take. And just to pull it back around again, because we're talking in lovely general states, but I want to draw it to your practice as well, Lisa, because my main inspiration for Family Frith was to draw lots of people together to talk about the creativity, like you've said, you're called to it because and it brings you purpose to share. So you're one of those people, and other people that I've interviewed as well. Then they're not a glossy psychotherapist straight out of uni that have never had any experience themselves. It's not just a glossy, perfect picture. These people that I'm interviewing, including yourself, Lisa, have really lived it. The most awful traumas, and I don't want to say coming out the other side. That's not the right phrase, um, but can relate, That's one of the biggest things actually that I remember and that I really relate to people when I first, meet somebody or somebody gets sent to me, that they say that they really have struggled to tell anybody anything. I don't want to burden my friends. My parents don't understand. My family have been manipulated against me. All of these things can happen. And it's such a lonely, isolating, painful place full of shame. You're really not just feeling, your aggressor's shame, but your own. And it doesn't belong to you, but you don't know because it's all mixed up. And so I think there's a lot of comfort in just telling the story to somebody who earlier on you were saying, smiling, and you're giving that sort of disclaimer. Smiling doesn't mean that I'm laughing at you, I don't care. But it's this like, I know exactly what you're going through, and this kind of, uh-huh. And there's this relief that somebody else really gets it. That's the first healing. That was for me at least as well. And I see it in other people that they go, thank you so much for listening. Honestly, the first consultation is usually just a good old chat. Yeah. So
Exactly.
that is
Exactly.
something I want to bring full circle to you as well in your practice, because that's what's missing from the family court processes. I do believe that there's going to be massive change. I mean, the movements are happening hugely, where there's what's that kids cartoon? Is it robots? And then the guy goes, see a need, fill a need. Anyway, it's about inventing things.
Yeah.
But the power of invention and the power of social media and it being able to reach so many people is a blessing. And I'm definitely going to write down all of the different things that you've said. I scribbled them down. One Mum's Battle and Tina Swinton, and there was another thing as well that you'd mentioned, like Facebook business. So we'll put all of those links and resources down there, not to give away all of your, trade secrets.
No, I don't gatekeep at all. I'm just like everyone should get the maximum amount of support possible.
100%.
Maximum.
Yeah.
Because we
And
need it. Like you said, it's very lonely. Lawyers won't get it. Friends get tired, or they don't actually get it either. And bless them, it's not their job either. But sometimes, when we're really in it, we need, well, I need someone like me. And that's why I do it. Um, because part of building that resilience and part of being able to get through this into the proverbial other side is you need to have a witness in it. You need to be witnessed in it. And if you are not, then that creates additional trauma in your body, in your system.
I feel like I'm going to wrap it up there, Lisa, but it's beautifully put because I'm hoping that through your brilliant sharings and our chat today, that people are feeling heard and witnessed, if they're feeling isolated or they're just starting or they don't know where to turn, or they've just tried the legal routes and all of the mainstream is not working for them, that they can come and find you, links below. They can have a look at the Family Frith website and all the other links for all the other people that are doing good work out there. But I'm hoping that's the general purpose. It's been so wonderful to talk to you. I've made notes of all the other things that I want to talk to you about, but I think we're going to save it for our next. I don't know how many hours
Yeah.
we've been talking about. Good couple.
I
To
mean, thank you so much. Sorry, I didn't want to
no,
cut
go
you
ahead.
off.
No, I'd finished. Yeah.
Just thank you for bringing everyone together because we do need as much support as possible and as much hope as possible that things improve and that there is just more support for people that are floundering because there's way too many cases of this and it's not decreasing, it's increasing.
Mhm.
Need
Yeah.
it more than ever. So thank you for doing what you do.
Oh gosh, thank you for thanking me. It's not really an option, it's just something that has to be born. Like your children have to be born and certain creations have to be born because it's like opening your mouth and somebody starts talking to you. You just have to start telling them your story or asking them questions and sharing what you know. Like you said, you're not a gatekeeper. And it's the same thing. It's just, yeah, it's what we're called to do.
Yes. Yeah.
And with that, I'm going to wish you a good day in Colorado. And
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
going
gonna
to
go
get out
back
of
if
this hot, sweaty room and go and drive home in the cool night air.
bless you. You're not home yet.
No, I'm actually at my parents' house today because we've had some exciting things, but I'll tell you off camera. I'm
All
going to
right.
press pause 1 second here. Let's press pause.